time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
Prince William did not raise his voice. He did not need to. With one final palace decision, the future king closed the door. Harry had spent months trying to reopen. And when the message reached California, even Meghan had no immediate answer. What made the order devastating was not merely what Harry had lost. It was who had finally decided that the waiting, bargaining, and uncertainty were over. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered the room at Windsor carrying a slim palace file, and the kind of silence that made everyone sit straighter. Weeks of unanswered questions had brought him here. Questions about whether Harry and Meghan might someday return to official royal work, appear on behalf of the crown, or rebuild a formal role through reconciliation. A palace directive, in simple terms, is an official instruction setting out how the institution will act, and this one left nothing open. The prince approved wording that permanently ended any route back to working royal status, any representation of the crown, and any later agreement designed to restore formal duties. Harry heard the decision during a private call and refused to accept its finality at first. He asked when the next review would happen. He asked who would reconsider the terms. Then the answer came. There was no review date, no reopening clause, and no future negotiation over royal duties. That mattered, because conversations had always left some space for another meeting. Now that space was gone. Meghan sat beside him while the explanation continued, her expression tightening as she realized private family contact could still exist, but institutional royal status had been separated from it completely. Meghan started to respond, then stopped. Harry did not. He demanded to know who had insisted on such absolute language, and learned that William himself had rejected softer wording, describing the arrangement as temporary. A documented palace account of the meeting recorded the brutal sentence of all. Future discussions concerning royal duties were formally concluded. The distinction cut deep. Harry was not being erased as a brother or son, but he was being shut out of royal service for good. William placed his pen beside the signed directive and looked toward the closed Windsor door. The official opposite him waited. "No more uncertainty," he said quietly. Harry, meanwhile, asked the one question that turned anger into something more dangerous. Had King Charles approved this? But his fury was never really about a document. It was about the brother who had signed it, and the father whose silence might have made it possible. Long before palace officials reduced their conflict to carefully chosen language, William and Harry had been brothers, carrying the same grief in completely different ways. One moved closer to duty, the other moved further away from it. Meghan became part of that widening divide, while Charles found himself trapped between fatherhood and monarchy. Now one signature had forced all four of them to confront what years of anger had finally become. William had spent years learning that every unresolved family dispute could eventually become a problem for the crown he was expected to inherit. As heir, his role was not simply to wait for the throne, but to prepare for the responsibilities that would one day fall on him. That made the conflict with Harry impossible to treat as only private pain. The prince remembered earlier moments when he still believed his brother could return under clear limits, and that memory made the final order hurt more, not less. Harry felt something entirely different. He saw the directive as his elder brother deciding where he belonged, and the distinction between family and institution gave him little comfort. Meghan shared that frustration because both had continued to value some connection to royal identity even after leaving full-time duties. A working royal, in plain terms, is a family member who officially carries out engagements and responsibilities for the crown. Losing every future path back to that position made the decision feel permanent in a way previous disputes never had. Meghan then learned something that deepened the shock. Several ceremonial appearances once discussed informally had quietly disappeared from future planning as well. A documented palace account of those internal discussions showed that possible roles at major national occasions were no longer being reserved for either of them. Harry listened as she explained what she had been told, and his anger sharpened. To him, this was no longer a boundary. It felt like an entire future being removed. Catherine found William alone not long after the signing. His tea remained untouched beside him, and she immediately understood that his calm tone had concealed the emotional cost. She asked whether he was truly certain. He did not answer at once. The silence stretched before he finally said, "I'm certain it cannot keep happening." Catherine heard no triumph in his voice. She heard exhaustion. Charles had already seen the core language of the directive by then, but Harry still did not know what his father had said when he read it. That unanswered question now hung over everything. William had made the decision. Meghan had discovered how far it reached. Harry had begun treating it as personal rejection. And behind those 6 quiet words from William sat the real turning point. A private royal gathering, where one demand changed his mind for good. Every family rupture has a moment people later identify as the beginning of the end. For William, it came months before the final order, inside a private Windsor meeting that had been arranged as an opportunity to reduce tensions. Instead, one exchange changed the atmosphere completely. Harry arrived believing the gathering could rebuild his royal future. William left believing his brother still did not understand the limits the monarchy was demanding. Charles had encouraged the meeting because he still hoped his sons could separate private pain from questions of royal duty. After months of messages passing through aides and carefully controlled conversations, he wanted them speaking directly again. A crown duty, in simple terms, is an official responsibility carried out on behalf of the monarch. That difference mattered because Harry wanted family reconciliation, but he also wanted clarity about whether he and Meghan could ever again perform selected public roles. Harry finally said what had been building beneath the surface. He asked for a guaranteed future pathway, allowing both himself and Meghan to resume limited crown duties and stand alongside senior royals during major national occasions. William went still. To him, the request proved that every attempt at personal peace was still being tied to institutional concessions. The younger brother saw it differently. He believed refusing even a limited route back meant the family wanted forgiveness without restoring dignity. William chose his words carefully. He told Harry there could still be birthdays, private visits, difficult conversations, and eventually even trust again. But none of that required a return to official royal functions. Harry pushed his chair back sharply. The sudden movement broke the restraint that had held the meeting together. He stood beside the Windsor table and asked, "So what exactly are you offering me?" The answer came quietly. "A brother, not a position." Meghan added another layer days later. During a recorded private call relayed through Harry, she argued that reconciliation without any public acknowledgement would leave them permanently diminished in the eyes of the institution. Harry repeated her concerns directly to William, expecting understanding. Instead, the future king heard confirmation that the argument had moved beyond family hurt. Meghan still wanted recognition connected to royal standing, while he had become convinced that peace could survive only if status was removed from the bargain. Charles met William privately after Harry left Windsor. The prince told his father that continued ambiguity would eventually become a larger crisis during his own reign. The king did not dismiss the warning. He listened. Months later, those words became the foundation of the final directive. But Harry never forgot that Windsor exchange, and he never accepted its meaning. Those words remained between the brothers until the day they finally faced each other again, and everything left unsaid came crashing back. When William and Harry finally entered the same private room, after the order became known, neither brought an advisor inside. There were no officials to soften their words, and no statement waiting to translate anger into palace language. For several minutes, the brothers spoke, as two men who had once trusted each other completely. Then Harry asked the question William had known was coming. "Did you really mean forever?" Harry had demanded the meeting because he refused to let palace representatives explain his brother's decision for him. William agreed, but only after making one condition clear. They could talk about family, pain, and whatever remained between them, but the directive itself would not be reopened. A directive, in plain terms, is a formal instruction setting out what the institution will do. That mattered because the prince had signed this one specifically to stop future negotiations from following him into his eventual reign. Harry's restraint broke first. He accused William of turning years of hurt into permanent policy, as though every argument, interview, and bitter exchange had now been sealed into one official judgment. The future king pushed back. He said uncertainty had damaged trust on every side and had turned nearly every attempt at reconciliation into another debate about status. The younger brother heard coldness in that answer. The elder heard exhaustion in his own voice. Harry then reached for the deepest wound between them. He reminded William of what they had once promised after losing Diana, that whatever happened, they would protect each other. The prince visibly struggled before answering. He told his brother that protecting family could not mean repeating the same painful pattern forever. Harry rose sharply from his chair. William stayed seated. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the younger brother sat again, not because his anger had disappeared, but because he wanted one final answer. Harry asked whether the order could be reversed when William became king. The answer came immediately. No. The entire point of signing it now, the future monarch explained, was to stop the same dispute from dominating the next reign. Then came the revelation Harry had feared most. According to a documented account of their private conversation, Charles had been given the chance to object before the directive advanced. He had not stopped it. Harry's anger collapsed into silence. Until that moment, he had believed he was fighting William's judgment. Now he understood that his father had seen the boundary and allowed it to stand. The younger brother looked down, then back at the man opposite him, searching for some softer interpretation that never came. William had delivered the decision, but the power behind it now led directly to the one person Harry had hoped would still intervene: his father. King Charles had spent years trying to hold two identities together, sovereign and father. But the final palace order demanded a choice between endless family negotiation and the stability William believed the monarchy required. Charles did not summon cameras. He did not make a declaration. His role was quieter and, for Harry, more devastating. The king had read the directive before it was finalized, and he had allowed it to stand. Charles received the proposed order in private and understood immediately that William was asking for more than short-term discipline. He was asking for a permanent institutional boundary. In simple terms, that meant a fixed line separating private family relationships from official royal roles. The prince argued that unresolved questions over status could not be allowed to follow him into the next reign, especially when each family dispute risked becoming another argument about the crown itself. The king knew why that mattered. Every delay kept the same wound open. Charles read the wording alone and stopped at the clause ending future negotiations over working royal status. He read it again. That line carried more weight than any public rebuke because it removed the possibility of another appeal years later. William had made the structure clear, but the father in him understood exactly how Harry would hear it. Not as stability, as final rejection. Camilla found Charles unusually withdrawn later that day. He admitted that refusing to stop William could hurt Harry more deeply than either of them wanted to accept. Yet overturning the decision would weaken the authority he expected his heir eventually to carry. The queen consort listened as the monarch explained the impossible balance: protect one son from pain, or protect the future king from inheriting the same unresolved conflict. Charles was then offered an easier option: delay the directive. Create a review several years later. Leave one narrow opening. He rejected it. According to a documented account of the private discussion, the king believed a review would only restart the same struggle at a later date. He did not author William's order, but by refusing to postpone it, he gave the prince the space to make it final. Charles closed the folder and removed his glasses. Camilla waited across from him while the silence stretched. Then he told her quietly that there were moments when being a father and being sovereign could not produce the same answer. She said nothing, because there was nothing gentle enough to answer with. And when that silence finally reached Harry, the argument changed. His anger had been aimed at William. Now it began cooling into something far heavier. He was no longer trying to overturn the order. He was beginning to understand what it had already taken from him. The most painful consequences were not announced at a podium. They arrived privately, one line at a time. A future ceremonial appearance disappeared. A proposed family arrangement was removed. Conversations once treated as unfinished were suddenly marked closed. Harry reacted first with fury. Meghan reacted differently. She listened as the implications were explained, asked one precise question, and then went completely silent when the answer confirmed that William's decision reached further than either had expected. Harry received the clarification during another private call and immediately focused on what remained. Family invitations could still happen, private visits were still possible. But neither he nor Meghan would hold an official representational role for the crown again. In simple terms, formal state representation means appearing or acting publicly on behalf of the monarch at official events. That distinction mattered because it preserved family contact while removing every path back to public royal duty. Their names would also disappear from future planning discussions, tied to working royal participation. Harry began pacing before the explanation was finished. He kept returning to Charles, asking why his father had not delayed the decision or insisted on some narrow exception. The anger was still there, but grief had entered it now. The younger brother was beginning to understand that the loss was not temporary. He was not waiting out a difficult season. He was watching one part of his old life become unreachable. Meghan asked the question that finally broke the room's remaining tension. Could a major family milestone, perhaps a national ceremony or deeply personal royal occasion, ever lead to temporary official duties? The answer was no. She stopped speaking. Harry looked toward her, expecting another question, but none came. The silence said more than outrage could have. Meghan had understood that even extraordinary circumstances would not reopen the institutional door. Harry then learned something that complicated his anger. William had deliberately protected private family contact from the directive. According to a documented palace account, the prince had insisted that the order define royal authority without preventing personal relationships. That meant Harry could not simply say his brother had erased him from the family. The future king had done something colder and more precise. He had separated kinship from power. Meghan reached across the table when the call ended and took Harry's hand. Neither spoke for several seconds. He placed the phone face down. She finally asked, "Is there anything left to appeal?" Harry shook his head. That answer should have ended the conversation. Instead, it created the first opening for a completely different one. For the first time, Harry began considering what he had resisted for years. Perhaps the only way forward was to stop fighting for a position and face William simply as his brother. The turning point did not come through lawyers, courtiers, or formal messages. It came when Harry and William met again without discussing titles for the first several minutes. No advisors sat between them. No palace wording protected either man. Harry had spent years defending what he believed had been taken from him. Now, for the first time, he asked his brother a different question. Not how to return to royal duty, but whether anything remained of their relationship. Harry requested the meeting only after deciding he would not ask for the directive to be reversed. That choice changed everything. William agreed because the institutional question was already settled, which meant neither brother had to measure every sentence against the possibility of another negotiation. In plain terms, the institutional question meant Harry's official place within the working monarchy. With that issue closed, the two men could finally speak about something far more difficult: whether the family bond underneath all the arguments had survived. Harry admitted that losing any path back to royal duty felt like losing another piece of the life they once shared. He did not disguise the bitterness. He told William that ceremonies, duties, and public roles had become tied in his mind to belonging itself. The prince listened without interrupting. Then he admitted something Harry had not expected. Signing the order had not felt like victory. It had felt like accepting that constant battles over status were destroying what little personal trust remained between them. William told his brother that certainty had become necessary because every unresolved question eventually turned private contact into another argument about position. Harry lowered his voice and asked whether he was still wanted at family occasions, when no cameras, duties, or official roles were involved. The answer came immediately: yes. According to a recorded account of the private conversation, the future king made the distinction painfully clear. Harry would always be his brother, but the monarchy could no longer be the place where that relationship was repaired. Harry finally admitted what years of anger had hidden. He had started treating access to royal duty as proof that he still belonged. Without that access, he feared the family itself would disappear. William told him those were two different things, and perhaps they should have separated them long ago. William extended his hand across the small table. Harry looked at it for a moment, then ignored the formality and embraced his brother instead. Nothing institutional changed. The directive remained untouched, but emotionally, something did. By the time the brothers left that room, the palace decision was irreversible. Outside those walls, however, Britain was only beginning to understand its scale. By morning, the private decision had become a national story. Broadcasters called it the clearest boundary yet between the future monarchy and the Sussex chapter. Newspapers treated William's order not as another family disagreement, but as evidence of how he intended to govern royal life when his own reign eventually came. Yet one image captured the public mood better than any headline: people gathering outside Buckingham Palace beneath a story about two brothers finally choosing separate paths. William woke to a country already arguing about what his decision meant. News coverage focused less on the original family dispute and more on the permanence of the directive. A working royal restoration, in simple terms, would mean returning Harry or Meghan to official public duties carried out for the crown. Commentators quickly understood the significance. Private contact had been left open, but the institutional route back had been shut. That separation gave the story a clarity previous royal disputes had never possessed. Harry's supporters called the decision painfully unforgiving. They argued that family wounds should not be turned into permanent boundaries. Others saw something different. They believed William had finally ended years of uncertainty that had repeatedly dragged private grievances into questions of royal status. The debate grew louder because both sides were reacting to more than Harry himself. They were reacting to what kind of future King William appeared determined to become. Catherine watched the coverage only briefly. One segment placed photographs of the brothers beside competing captions about betrayal and authority. She turned it off before the discussion finished. The princess had seen the emotional cost behind the directive, and hearing a deeply personal fracture reduced to television arguments made her uneasy. William noticed what she had done, but did not ask her to turn it back on. One morning broadcast pushed the story into a single unforgettable phrase: brothers apart. William closes royal door, leaves family door open. The wording spread quickly, because it captured the contradiction at the heart of the decision. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates, as photographers captured one man holding a newspaper, with William and Harry placed on opposite sides of the front page. William later saw that same edition laid out during breakfast. He looked at the photograph, folded the paper once, and placed it aside without reading the commentary beneath it. Palace staff noticed something else just as striking. No aggressive official defense followed. The order was considered complete, so there was nothing left to sell or justify. The world wanted winners and losers. But public reaction could only frame the moment. The final truth belonged to the family itself, and it was harder, quieter, and far more personal. In the end, William's final decision did exactly what its wording promised. Harry would not return as a working royal. Meghan would not regain an official role beside the crown. Charles would not overturn the boundary, and William would not reopen negotiations. Yet the order that seemed designed to end one relationship unexpectedly saved another. Once royal status was removed from the argument, two brothers were finally forced to confront what remained when there was nothing left to bargain over. Harry stopped fighting for a restored palace role because there was finally nothing left to negotiate. He and Meghan remained outside the working structure of the monarchy, with no future pathway created for official restoration. A working royal, in simple terms, is someone who carries out formal public duties on behalf of the crown. That chapter had now closed completely. Meghan's earlier shock slowly settled into something quieter. She understood that the royal future they once hoped might reopen was no longer waiting behind another meeting, another ceremony, or another private appeal. Charles accepted the arrangement as the settled position of the crown. The king understood that William would now carry responsibility for protecting that boundary into the future, and he privately admitted relief that his sons could finally speak, without every family encounter becoming a battle over status. According to a documented account of one private conversation, the monarch believed the permanent decision had removed the most destructive question from their relationship. It had cost Harry deeply, but it had also ended years of uncertainty. William felt no sense of victory. He knew the order had not restored the trust that once existed between them, and it could not erase years of anger. But the prince also recognized something important. By closing the institutional argument, he had created room for a personal relationship that no longer depended on royal approval. Harry had lost the future role he once hoped to recover, yet he was beginning to accept that belonging did not have to come through ceremony, titles, or public recognition. Harry heard that truth directly during one final private exchange. William told him that nothing in the order prevented him from being present as a son, a brother, or an uncle. The younger brother paused before answering that perhaps they should have separated those things years earlier. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had gone wrong. William opened the door himself when Harry prepared to leave. There was no handshake, no official farewell, and no palace representative waiting between them. Harry looked back once, nodded, and walked away knowing exactly where he stood. The palace door to royal duty had closed for good, but for the first time in years, the door between two brothers was no longer being held open by a title. It was being held open by choice. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.